Let's look at another student. And as you listen to each of these students, maybe some of them are more true to you. Maybe all of them are true to you. I don't know how many of you felt you were the doubter. Let's go to the next student. And this is two students. We call this the student with misplaced zeal. We're going to talk about the girl first and then the boy second. Look at this girl. They just got engaged. She is really excited. But the last thing she wants to be told is to think about her career. She's about to get married. She has a ring. She's excited to be a mother. Why do I even have to worry about all this education stuff? Sister Bingham, I'm going to start this with you. We have so many sisters in BYU Pathway all across the church. What would you say to this young sister or some of our sisters who are later in life going back to get their education about why it's a blessing and an important calling for the sisters of the church, even those who say, quote, I just want to be a mom?
And that's a wonderful thing to want to be. None of us would disagree with that. I think maybe the key is, President Gilbert, keeping an eternal perspective. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how our life is going to turn out. So when we shortchange ourselves on education as a woman, then we're not prepared to bless others and really fulfill our divine potential as a daughter of God. I think about friends of mine who have had opportunities to raise a family, others who have not. And we just don't know. And the other thing that comes to my mind is that we are commanded to learn in this life. I think about the scripture that came to my mind, and you'll recognize this one. Whatever principle of intelligence we attain unto in this life, it will rise with us in the resurrection. So we are never handicapped by learning. And the second verse, and if a person gains more knowledge and intelligence in this life through his diligence and obedience in another, he or she will have so much the advantage in the world to come. We are all wanting to become like our heavenly parents. We need to learn everything we can. Now, I can tell from my personal experience that I always wanted to be a mother. And I tried to go to college for a little while and was in the nursing program. Everything I learned in those classes, even though I didn't finish my degree at that time, I used in my mothering. The child development, the nutrition, every one of those classes helped me. Years later, I was able to go back to school. I really wanted to finish my degree, and I ended up going into education and teaching. It was fascinating to see that there was not one class that was wasted that I went to, no matter when it was. It helped me to be a better person, a better mother. It helped me to serve in the church. It helped me to bless other people's lives as well as my own. And I feel that if we work toward our divine potential, anything that we learn is an advantage.
That's powerful. And I think what you're saying is that it's not just for our schooling. It may be, we don't know what will happen in life circumstances. We also see blessings as a mother and as someone building the kingdom. I'd like to ask my wife, Christine. We're parents of 8 children. It's a busy household at the Gilbert home. We've talked about this, but what about your education has blessed you as a mother?
Well, I think my education has really just helped me to help us to establish a learning environment in our home. Our home is busy, and President Nelson's counseled us as parents to establish houses of learning with our new home-centered curriculum, and I'm grateful for the things that I learned in school that have helped us to establish it. And it comes up in a lot of different ways, but a few of those that I've thought of are the time management that I needed to learn in school, and you know, that showed up in school, being able to take tests on time or turn in papers, and I don't do that anymore, but I'm still blessed knowing how to manage our time and our schedules and the things that go on in our house. And another thing that I learned while I was getting my education was really to observe and ask good questions. And that's something that I always need every single day as I observe our children and think about them and the things that they might need, and then go to the Lord and ask questions, good questions that might lead us to know as parents what they need. And maybe one more thing, as I was going to school, I really learned during that time to invite the Spirit into my life every day to help guide and direct me in the things I needed to do. And that's just an essential thing that we need in our home right now, is having the Spirit guiding and directing us and inviting the Spirit into our home.
Well, this is great counsel to our sisters. Elder Gay, I'm going to ask you to look at this return missionary. You were a mission president in West Africa.
Yes.
I'm sure you've had lots of return missionaries who come home and say, I want to go back to those glory days when I was building the kingdom and doing things that mattered. Now I just got to do all this secular stuff, and is education really part of the church, and is it building the kingdom? And what would you say to this return missionary who doesn't see the connection between education and a service in the church?
Well, first of all, when I look at that picture, it reminds me of when I returned as a missionary. And I was engaged 6 months after I returned home. And
That long.
what can I say, you know? And my wife and I, we decided, we were both going to school, and we decided we'd take one course together. And I will never forget the day that we both walked into that course, and the final exam was being given, and neither of us knew that it was the final exam day. And it's easy to get defocused, and it's easy to let the bliss of life, you know, get you going on many different paths. What any missionary knows, that missionary work is hard work. And it's not just running from spiritual high to spiritual high. It's down in the nitty gritty of planning, you know, seeking, knocking, and really moving people along. And as I was listening to Sister Bing, I cannot think of anything that you would learn in a classroom that is not applicable in some other setting. If anybody thinks getting married and having kids and raising them and nurturing doesn't require problem solving, creativity, discipline, all of which you learn in the classroom setting and education, and ultimately the importance of working towards achieving goals in your life, even if you never use that educational degree in the field you go, you will always use that experience to teach people what you have to do to move your life and the lives of others ahead. So there is no other path than to learning is just all part of what the Heavenly Father sent us here to do, to work and to grow so that we may help and bless.
Love it. You know, Elder Holland, you started us out on the doctrine. For both of these young students, what is it about our doctrine that tells them, you know, they think their zeal and commitment to the church doesn't include their education? What would you teach them about the doctrine itself that would help them understand the connection?
Well, I think it's already coming out in both of these questions, and certainly Sister Bingham, right at the outset on this one, noted that it is doctrine. She's citing passages from the Doctrine and Covenants. I'm reminded of a woman I met through my mission president, interestingly enough. She was 85 years old and had just begun to study Russian. Well, it wasn't because she was going to go on a mission to Russia, and it wasn't because she thought she was going to move there. But when my president, and he invited me to be with him, when he pressed her a little, quizzed her a little bit about why would you do this at 85 or 86, and she was shocked. She was stunned to think that there'd be any reason not to. I'm in this for the whole trip. You know, I'll get this mortuary part taken care of later, and I'm going on. Who knows what I'll do with my Russian? But it was an attitude. It was a view of learning and eternally, really eternally. One other thing that I would add to in conjunction with that. It's still about attitude. It's still about vision. I think Abraham Lincoln is probably credited with being the most unsuccessful politician among the most unsuccessful politicians in the history of American political life, losing election after election after election as his would-be career unfolded, and it wasn't going anywhere. And somebody asked him, why did he persist, and why did he keep running? And by implication, why do you keep losing? and his simple answer was, I will prepare, and perhaps one day my time will come. He was in his 30s, and his time came. So I think the Lord has to use what we give him, and he would like to use us a lot more than he can or does. We have to give him some help. We have to give him something to work with. And I think that's what arguably the one or two greatest presidents the United States ever did. I say that with love for all nations out there that are hearing this broadcast. Just happens to be a nearby application here.
Can I build on that
Please.
briefly? We ought to become consecrated saints. Consecrate means to dedicate to a holy purpose. But there's also an element of develop and dedicate. So we're not just what we are. If we are consecrated, we are to develop ourselves with God's help to be the best that we can be and dedicate ourselves to a holy purpose. So you come home from a mission, there's a bit of a structure and a scaffolding that's been around you in the mission field. And the question is, can you continue to develop and dedicate yourself to a holy purpose when you don't have that protective scaffolding? That's part of the test. But it's develop and dedicate. It takes both.
Can I add one more? The insights of the gospel bring so much to us. Perhaps the most famous line from Shakespeare might be Hamlet's, to be or not to be. That's not the question for us. We're going to be. The question is to become or not to become. And we just have these gospel gifts and insights that can add something to the finest minds and messages in the world, and we bring a gospel insight to it, like consecration, and to be is a given. The big question is, what are we going to become? And that's largely, greatly, perfectly, and beautifully in our hands.
Elder Cook?
I've always been impressed that the early church leaders in this dispensation, Joseph Smith and his associates, almost to the man, had very, very little education. But they had an enormous desire to learn. Think of the school of the prophets. Think of the many efforts they made to increase their education. Many of them were engaged in things such as farming and other things that you'd say, well, that wouldn't require a lot of, but they were pretty determined to move forward and get the education. And we've had that history in this dispensation, and it's a wonderful thing to have this pathway and to have that go forward among future generations. It'll be a great, great blessing.
Thank you.